Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. I've just got to do a quick video today and basically go over a trick I worked out on how to do kind of almost like a soft fake baked shadow coming out of dynamic objects. Now what do I mean by that? So something that's kind of been popular in BMX Streets recently is the object dropper mod, where basically people can place objects into the levels at runtime, which obviously means baking shadows is never going to work because that's done at map creation time. And this is a good example here of where it's not really required because there's a sunlight casting a big shadow on this dynamic object, and it kind of makes it look integrated into the scene. But then I have another example here of where there's these ramps that's been placed inside the sun shadow because there's a massive building casting a big shadow here, and they look completely kind of like unintegrated into the scene. And I have another example here of kind of like what a before and after will look like. So if we were to take a bench and bake it into the scene, it would look like this, but then if we were to place one at runtime, it would look like this. And basically what we want is for it to look like this at runtime, and so you can move it around and still get that shadow. And I have a little example here of where my kind of proof of concept of this. So it looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to basically kind of show you the bare minimum to kind of get this concept working. So I've got an empty scene here in Unity. I'm going to add in sky and fog volume to start with and just get it set up to do the bare minimum. Just going to add in a HDR sky and an exposure component. I'm going to use Kloofendahl main sky. It's one of my favorite ones. Okay, so this scene is kind of set up as the bare minimum now, just to be able to see what I'm doing. Now I'm going to bring in a bench asset we have here. Set the 0 point in the scene, which is good. And we're basically what we're going to do is we're going to bake some light with bakery, and we're going to bake this onto a plane, and that's going to act as a shadow catcher. And then we're going to take the light map that's been baked by bakery and kind of process it and turn it into a decal that we can then save as a child of this prefab. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to add in a new plane into the scene. I'm going to make sure it's zeroed out in the middle. I always have like a mid-grey material in my scenes for testing, and you can see that it's kind of like, it looks like it's got a shadow already because of the ambient occlusion. So I'm just going to take that out as well, just so we can see what we're working with here. Okay, like this. So we've got this plane. Now it's zeroed out in the center of the scene, the bench is zeroed out, so I know that they're kind of lined up perfectly. I'm going to just take this plane and just scale it a bit to what I roughly feel is going to be like the right spot to catch the shadow. We'll do something like that. I'm going to check that it's kind of like in the right spot here, and it's fine. So that's fine. Now I'm just going to take this plane again, and I'm going to move it down and make it really big. And the purpose of this one is to basically stop in the light bake light coming from downwards and up in. So it's kind of just going to, it's not actually going to capture anything. It's just going to be there to stop this getting light from the bottom side of the HDRI. So we got these in here now. Now what can we do to get that set up? So I'm going to add in, let's call this catcher, which had a new game object here. I'm going to add in a bakery sector. I'm going to add in a bakery light map group. I'm going to set it to be 1K resolution and create the light map group object. And I'm going to take all this stuff, put it inside, and then on the parent, I'm just going to make everything static and all its children static. But what we're going to do is we actually only want one thing to capture shadows here. We don't want the bench to capture shadows. We don't want this bottom ground plane to capture them. We only want this one to capture them. So what we can do to do that when everything's static and is being used in the bake is to basically set it to receive global illumination light probes, and then I'll do that for all the meshes inside this bench as well. Set those to light probes. Well, they actually already are, but that's kind of something you need to make sure of. So right now the only thing in here that is set to light maps is this plane, which is perfect. So we've got our kind of sector set up here ready to go. Now I'm just going to add in our baking sky. So I'm going to add in a game object, call it skylight. I'm going to add in skylight. I'm going to add in the Kloofendahl sky again. Everything else here can just be left as is. Now I've got my bakery set up here. I'm not going to go through all the options, but you can just copy these ones if you want. Now I'm going to select the capture sector and bake. Okay, so now I'm going to swap into baked light map view just to check it's done what we need, and it has. Looks fine. So what this is there's basically now we've got is baked a HDRR light map that we need to basically now process and turn it into a decal. So this is obviously a HDR image, it's not SDR, so it's kind of like got a big range. So the first thing we need to do is basically process this into SDR. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it into Photoshop like this. I'm just going to duplicate the layer, delete the original. So the first thing we need to do is take all the color out because it's kind of getting some blue in it from the HDR that we baked with. So I'm going to put hue and saturation on, take the saturation down, and then I'm going to put a levels component on. I'm just going to drag this until we get pure white around. I'm just going to double check that with the color picker. I can see that it is. Actually, something that I forgot to do here was to turn this into SDR. So I'm going to do that. Just go image mode, 8 bits. Okay, now my levels needs to change. Just double check that that's all white. You need to see FFFF there. So that's fine. I'm doing what we want. I actually might make this just a bit darker as well, like this. Okay, and that looks good to me. Now I'm just going to select all the layers, Control E to merge. And now we need to basically turn this into a transparent shadow, right, for our decal projector. So I'm just going to turn the layer off. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to make sure that my secondary color in the palette is black. Then do Control backspace to fill. Now I'm going to go back to this layer. I'm going to do Control A, Control C, Control D to basically select all, copy, deselect. And I'm going to go back to our black layer, add new layer mask, hold Alt and click the layer mask. Then I'm going to do Control Shift V to paste it in, and then Control I to invert. Go back to here, and this is basically exactly what we need right here. So I'm going to export this, and I'm just going to call it Shadow Catcher. Now, if we go back into Unity, that we can see that we've got this appear here now, and this is what we want. We want black on the RGB channels, and on the alpha channel, this kind of like white opacity mask. So that's fine. I'm going to swap back to normal shaded view, and then I'm just gonna duplicate this whole sector and put it over here so there's no baked shadows in it. So now what we're going to do is set up basically the decal projector that's going to take this texture that we've caught. So I'm going to go create material, call it shadow catcher, swap the shader to decal. Then I'm going to drag our texture into here. It's going to turn off all this other stuff for now. I'm going to drag the opacity up to 1. And then in this bench we have here, I'm going to right click it, go rendering, decal projector. I'm going to call it shadow. I'm going to change the scale mode to inherit from hierarchy, and then I'm going to drag our shadow catcher material onto it. So this is going to be the wrong size right now, so I'm going to go to isometric view, top down, and then I'm just going to scale this to the same size as the plane. And then swap back to perspective view. And you can see this is kind of lined up right, but it's casting this kind of fake shadow on the top of the bench. So I'm going to select this here that modifies the bounds, drag this down until it's right at the bottom of the bench here. And that looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to check that it's all lined up right, and it is. So if I move this around, see the shadow's pretty much in the right spot. Actually, maybe it could be just a tiny bit bigger. Oh, it's fine. Okay, so now we've kind of got our fake baked shadow here now. Now if we can move this bench around, you can see that the shadow kind of moves with it, which is good. So now I'm going to basically save this into the bench. So I'm going to set it back to 0. And now I'm going to, because you can see there's a plus here, I'm going to save it into the prefab just by applying all here. Now I'm going to go and basically test this out in another scene just to see if it's kind of doing what we want. So I have a good example scene here. It's actually the same scene that the examples were from earlier in the video. So I'm going to test it out in a spot that is kind of in a lot of shadow. So I think probably here is good. I'm going to go find the bench prefab, and you can see it immediately looks pretty good. We've got the visible shadow underneath. And actually what I might want to do is just make this a little bit stronger. So I'm just going to do another levels on this again. Basically make that darker, but maybe something like that. I'm going to just do the same as before, paste it into the layer mask here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So there's one other thing that we can do with this, and that is that maybe we're going to want to basically occlude the reflections from underneath the bench. I'll try and find an example of where that might work well. Find a bit with a lot of puddles, like right here. So right now underneath this bench that you can see everything's reflecting quite strongly from under there. Maybe we don't want it to do that. So what we can actually do is, in our material for the decal, is enable smoothness. And then for we'll use the channel as the base color map alpha. So if we turn that on and off now, we can see that basically it's reducing the smoothness of the decal, which makes everything a lot less shiny underneath, which is good, I think. So now we can do a little test and turn it on and off. See, it looks pretty good, I think. One other thing we might want to do eventually with this object is stack them on top of each other. So I'm just going to rotate this, bring it over, bring it up here, kind of get it positioned right. So this is looking pretty good, and it's kind of casting a shadow. It looks like it's casting a shadow on this bench that it's stacked on, but the decal projector is not actually in the right spot for it to work properly. Actually, what the decal wants to do is move up a bit like this. But the problem now that we've moved it up is that we're getting this shadow on the legs. So what we can actually do is use the receive decals kind of checkbox on the material. And luckily this bench has been made in 3 different materials, so the legs are a different material to the main surfaces. So for the legs, I'm just going to turn off receive decals. And yeah, that's looking pretty good to me. So yeah, I think that pretty much concludes the video. If it was helpful, drop me a like and a subscribe, and see you in the next one.